In 1986, the whole of the centre of Hammersmith in West London was derelict. It had been marred in political and financial problems for over 20 years, as the landowner, London Transport, had attempted to find a solution for its redevelopment. As many of you know, before I became a priest, I was in property development. And in 1982, a company I worked for was chosen by London Transport, who owned the site, to be its development partner. And after 4 years of planning and negotiation, we signed a planning agreement with Hammersmith Council, which secured the site's redevelopment. And 6 years later, we had completed a £180 million redevelopment project, which is equivalent to about £400 million today. It included a new underground station, new bus station, a shopping centre, and new European headquarters for Coca-Cola and Walt Disney. The development triggered the regeneration of this whole part of West London, and the most recent success is the renewal of St Paul's Church on the other side of the road to the scheme that we developed. And in 1992, when we had finished, it was still a dismal, neglected church. And today, as a result of a church plant from Holy Trinity Brompton, it's a thriving Christian centre. These sorts of transformation don't happen by osmosis or accident. They require vision, planning and commitment, and lots of different people with a whole variety of skills coming together, being well-resourced and working towards a common objective. If we go back to the Gospels and look at Jesus' ministry, we see that in just 3 years, he had managed to build the foundations of the church. A church which today spans the globe. Christianity is the religion of 1/3 of all people. A faith that has the power to draw an estimated 3 million people to Cobham Beach for a monumental scale mass celebrated recently by Pope Francis during his visit to Brazil. Jesus' ministry wasn't a series of accidental events. Jesus had a vision of what he wanted to achieve from the outset. He gathered around him lots of different people with a whole variety of skills. He valued everyone for who they were, not judging them. He encouraged them, taught them, and gave advice on how to live. And he gave them a common objective, to draw more and more people into the way of God. As we read of the infant church in Acts and the epistles, we discover a church dedicated to growth. As Christians today, we have a huge amount to be thankful for. We're part of a worldwide church that remains committed to spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. And at St Andrews, we're particularly blessed. I think our church is in excellent health. So we might ask, why on earth do we need a vision? Isn't everything going rather well at the moment? Well, I believe the answer's twofold. First, we are in good health, but this hasn't happened by accident. We've been working hard together in the last 10 years to build St Andrews and to keep it refreshed in an ever-changing world. And so we need to continue planning for the future. And secondly, if we're to be faithful to Jesus Christ and true heirs of those first apostles, then an absolute priority for us should be to grow our church. This means deepening our own personal faith in Jesus Christ, increasing our service to the community, both locally and further afield, and telling more and more people about the saving gospel of Christ. So our vision for St Andrews isn't just about looking outwards. It's also about how each one of us as Christians uses our God-given gifts, our time, and our wealth and possessions. So our vision looks inwards to the life of our church and then outwards to our service in Jesus' name, and to our demonstrating and telling the story of faith to others in a way that is relevant in this fast-changing world. In preparing our vision for the future, the PCC spent time looking at our church today. We looked at what was happening, we assessed what was good, but we also drew out in the process what things we could do more of, do differently, and what we could do better. Well, you'll be relieved to know that I'm not going to share with you all the details of the PCC's deliberations at its away day and thereafter. Instead, I'm just going to take a few snapshots of our church, because these give us a clue as to where we're heading. The first snapshot's about welcome and nurture. We do as a church have a desire to draw new people into the life of our church. And by way of example, I looked at our PCC. There are 26 members of the PCC. That's about 10% of our membership. We have 260 odd people on our electoral roll. What's quite interesting is that 18 of that 26 weren't coming to St Andrew's Church when I arrived 9 years ago. That's good news, because what it shows is that our longer established church members do look to draw new people into the life of our church. But you might ask, well, what happened to all the other people who used to be on the PCC? So I then looked back at who was on the PCC 9 years ago, and I found that 80% of them are still attending St Andrews and still remain actively involved in its life. Only 3 had moved away, and sadly a couple had died. So as a church, we have the capacity to open our doors to new people and welcome them into the life of the church, and we are making space for them. But at the same time, we're managing to sustain the Christian lives of our longer-standing faithful members who build the fellowship of the church. The second snapshot's about discipleship, being followers of Christ. We make a difference when we commit to following Christ more closely. Whatever shape that ministry might take, it builds up our church, caring for the elderly, being a volunteer, reflecting faith in our homes and in the places where we work, taking a role in the church, such as a church warden, pastoral assistant, or a minister. I want to take our homegrown ministers. Peter's just celebrated 20 years of ordination, and Renos has been ordained for 6. With their faith and vocation nurtured at St Andrews, their calling encouraged by members of the church, they've established considerable ministries. And it's quite difficult now for us to imagine our church without them, because they're central to so many of our activities. Whereas many churches struggle to find church wardens, we've constantly found excellent people to take on the role, such as David and Moni, our current wardens. And we've developed new roles that have made a huge difference to the work of the church. Examples are Jan Brind, who's our assistant for liturgy, who's helped us to transform our informal family worship and create contemporary communion services. And Sue Aitken, who's our assistant for marriages, and she's created a real welcome for the numerous couples who come to us to be married. More recently, our homegrown team has grown again, with Hugh Bryant committing to 3 years and training and being licensed as a reader. And then we decided to invest in children's work by employing Catherine Peachy part-time. And most recently, we have the arrival of Folia Lacosi as our training curate. All of these people are helping us to grow our church. The Gospels and Acts constantly speak of growing groups of Christians. The church began with a tiny number, the 12 disciples, and others close to Jesus, such as Mary Magdalene, Martha, and Mary. But very rapidly, the number of followers grew, from encounters such as the Samaritan woman at the well to Jesus sending out 70 people. The gospel of Jesus Christ spread. And today, every person who makes the sort of individual commitment that those people I've just mentioned makes, whatever shape or form the commitment takes, continues this work of spreading the gospel and drawing new followers of Christ. My third snapshot is about investing in the future. Before I arrived at St Andrews, Barry Priest and Peter Ostley and others led the church on the hugely significant and successful development of Churchgate House. And it's very hard to imagine our church today without those wonderful facilities. And since 2004, we've constantly invested in our buildings, renewing the fabric and installing modern technology. And we're about to install a new lighting system and video system throughout the church, paid for by a hugely generous legacy from the late Marion Pigeon. The steady stream of renewals and improvements has allowed both our worship life and our non-worship activities to flourish. What these stories show us is that wise investment in welcome, in discipleship, in people, and in infrastructure makes a real difference to our church. And these wise investments didn't happen by chance. The constant renewal of our PCC membership is the result of deliberate efforts by existing PCC members year by year to draw in new people. The growth of vocations of all kinds has been underpinned by a deliberate strategy of encouragement so that the church's life can be sustained and developed. And the renewal of our buildings has been part of a determination by lots of people to adapt our church and hall for new technology and to care for the fabric of our truly beautiful church and this wonderful hall we have. Taking up opportunities to improve them whenever they arise. Our recent history shows us that if we are to grow our church further, it is better to plan for growth rather than just hope it will happen. Our vision will have a much better chance of being fulfilled if we make further investments in people and in resources that will enable our church's mission to flourish. The PCC and the Vision team distilled all the work it did on where the church is today, and we put this alongside our hopes for the future, and we began to identify our priorities. Our first priority was neatly summed up in a recent comment from our new Archbishop. It's been public sport for some years now to have a go at the Church of England. We have in Justin Welby an Archbishop of Canterbury who the world wants to listen to. He's someone people can relate to. His 10 years in industry reassure people that he's spent time in the real world, and he's prepared to tackle some of the challenges both within the church and in society. His challenges to Wonga, the payday lenders, have been widely applauded and is being taken up around the country. This creates a positive atmosphere for our church to work in. So the Church of England now has a leader who can generate admiration for the church and for people of faith. An opinion column in the Times even suggested that maybe he should be Prime Minister. Not bad for someone who, when he wanted to be ordained, was told by the Bishop of Kensington, "There's no place in the church for you." When we have the courage to reshape, to change our lives a bit, truly wonderful things can happen. Not just for us, but for the people we share our lives with. St. Paul says in Ephesians that each of us is given his or her own gift. And he goes on, God wants us to grow up, to know the whole truth, and tell it in love, like Christ in everything. We take our lead from Christ, who is the source of everything we do. Finding out what God is calling us to do isn't something we'll discover sitting at home on our own. Our church flourishes when we encourage one another, when we spend time together thinking about our faith, our church, and what part we can play in it, and when we work together. We've got some great examples at the moment. Working with other churches, St. Andrew's people are setting up a food bank in Cobham. This year we ran our first Alpha course, and we've got a second plan for 2014. Following up our Echo Congregation Award, a group of people are working away at seeing how our faith relates to our care for God's creation. They recently gave a presentation to the diocese, who now sees St. Andrew's Church as a model of best practice that can inspire other churches. This truly is fantastic work. When we get involved in things like this, we move forward in our own sense of being Jesus' disciples. And we spread the word of God and bring his goodness to others in really tangible ways. So our first priority for the future is to help one another grow as disciples of Christ, to encourage us all to deliberately apply our Christian faith to our day-to-day lives. Our second priority is about welcome. A number of years ago, a new family started coming to St Andrew's Church, having worked abroad for some years. I think we were friendly and we made them feel very welcome. But after about a year, I'd noticed that they weren't coming so often. In fact, they'd moved to another church. And a few years later, a chance encounter through a family marriage gave me the opportunity to ask them why they'd left St Andrew's. Well, they said, we wanted to become involved, but no one asked us to do anything, and we felt a bit excluded. I'm glad to say that this story has a happy ending, and that couple are now back at St Andrew's and are involved in our church's life. But though we are welcoming to people when they first come to us, we've known for some time that we can do more to encourage people to come more involved and feel St Andrew's is their church. We know we can do it because my example of the Parochial Church Council demonstrates that. But that's just 20 people. And we believe we can do a great deal more to help people join and feel part of our church family. So our second priority is to welcome and nurture our congregation more than we do at the moment. Our third priority is young people. 3 years ago, the PCC decided to support our work with children and families by employing Catherine as a children and families worker. And we're now reaping the rewards of that decision. There was a bit of worry at the time that by employing someone, we'd simply replace volunteers with paid staff. But this hasn't happened. In fact, the opposite is true. We now have more volunteers involved in our children's work, and working with other churches locally, we've started Messy Church with over 70 children regularly coming to our monthly sessions. But what has become an increasing challenge for us has been to consider how we address the now very well-established pattern of Sunday morning sports and other activities for older children and teenagers. And the result has been that while we've been able to build a secure Kids on Sunday base on Sunday mornings, we haven't been successful in sustaining Christian activities for the 10+ age group. And this isn't the case with other local churches such as Cobham, Ashton and Claygate. But at the same time as the decline in teenage activities on Sunday mornings, the past 7 years has been a great success with our youth club Say It's Friday. This flourished under the leadership of Fiona Lascelles. But now we need more leaders, and we want it to become distinctively Christian, offering Christian nurture alongside fun and social activities. And so we're taking the bold step at the end of this year of moving Say It's Friday to Sunday evenings and reformatting the sessions to increase Christian content. And we're hopeful that our plans will include introducing Youth Alpha to St Andrew's Church later on in 2014 or 2015. Now, to support this development of our children and youth work, we're very fortunate to have some very committed volunteers willing to develop Say It Sunday. And crucially, we have Folly Olakosi, who works with us full-time now, but he's only going to be with us for 3 years. And so our long-term vision is to follow the success of our strategy with a children and families worker by eventually creating a permanent youth worker role to coordinate and inspire our Christian ministry to young people in Cobham. And that is our third priority. Our fourth and final priority is community engagement. Earlier I spoke of Justin Welby and his passion for serving those around the church. I think one of the problems we have in our community, in our church community, church family, is we don't naturally make a connection when we see people who come to St Andrew's Church working in our community. We're inclined to see this as a coincidence, and we may not realise that it is likely to be a conscious or even quite likely an unconscious outworking of their faith in Jesus Christ. Certainly there are areas where we're demonstrably the church at work. St Andrew's School is a key area where we work hard to sustain the Christian ethos of the school and gives considerable support in all sorts of different ways. 5 of the school's governors are involved in our church. We also have teachers and teaching assistants working there. We take assemblies every week and encourage the school to take part in our services. And we've recently developed a strong prayer ministry at the school, not just for staff, but for children as well. And there's potential to do more. Elsewhere in the community, we're very busy. A small group of us have been deeply involved in developing plans with Surrey County Council for the new community centre and library in Cedar Road. The church in particular has championed the creation of space in the building for the Oasis Family Centre and the Children's Centre, who work with vulnerable and deprived families in our community. And with community leaders, we are creating the opportunity to bring under one roof access to services such as the police, health visitors, Citizens Advice Bureau, Surrey Save and others. Church members since its inception have worked and volunteered for the Cobham Conservation and Heritage Trust, and in particular the church and its members have played a key role in the huge success of Heritage Day. Church members are leaders of the Cobham Downside Residents Association. A number of our district and county councillors come to St Andrew's and St Mary's churches. Members of the church were involved in the renewal of River Hill. Cobham's local historian is our church warden. The church is the key organisation in Cobham Combined Charities, which distributes over £15,000 each year to the vulnerable people in our community. And added to this, we're a tithing church, giving away 10% of all our general income to support local and overseas projects. And last year, we gave away over £11,000. And we have a great track record of working overseas, building valuable links with places as diverse as Gulu and Kosovo. And church members are key to the success of the Elmbridge Multi-Faith Forum. And most recently, as I just mentioned, with others from Churches Together, we're in the process of launching the Cobham Area Food Bank, a major new initiative to provide emergency relief to those who find themselves in crisis, unable to feed themselves and their families. I could go on further, and no doubt some of you are already thinking about other work that you're involved in. But the key message is that we are properly engaged and committed to serving our community, and most significantly in this extremely wealthy area, the vulnerable, the elderly and the very young. So our 4th priority is to see this kind of community engagement flourish and grow further. We want the work that we're doing to be more visible, both within the church to inspire one another and outside the church to encourage people to be interested in St Andrews and in our faith. Our vision for St Andrews for the next 5 years isn't just about doing more as individual followers of Jesus Christ and together as a church. It's also about responding to changes in our world, changes in the way people live, work and communicate. Because if we don't pay attention to the world around us, we can very easily get left behind and forgotten. You may have read in recent weeks of the sale of Nokia's mobile phone business to Microsoft. The Nokia story is a salutary one. In 2007, half of all mobile phones sold in the world were Nokia's. It was selling 250 million phones a year. Then along came the iPhone. Suddenly, smartphones with big screens that did lots more than make calls and send texts had arrived. Nokia failed to see the significance of the new technology and the importance of software. At its peak, Nokia's stock market value was 186 billion euros. On the day of its sale to Microsoft, it was worth just 11 billion euros. In only 6 years, Nokia's share of the mobile phone market have fallen from 50% to 3%. in just 6 years. We may not be in the telecoms business, but our church does need to be conscious of the changing world we live in, particularly in the area of communication and awareness of the way people live and work. If we don't keep pace with change, we will be left behind. We risk being irrelevant and outdated, and most worrying, we risk our gospel message being ignored. In this fast-changing world, we have the opportunity to use tools that people are increasingly relying upon to communicate. We're on Facebook and Twitter, and we have an excellent website. But we lack the human resources at the moment to benefit from the huge potential of this digital world and to change and increase the amount of communication we do. And in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Renos, who's going to describe how we see our vision being fulfilled by investing in people and resources. But before I do that, I want to end by summarising our vision with a phrase we will use to remind ourselves and to tell other people of our vision. There was a joke about the last Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, that he didn't talk in sound bites, he talked in sound paragraphs. We clearly can't have all the aspects of the vision I've outlined listed out on all our publicity. So like churches up and down the country, we're summarising our vision with a brief phrase. The first part is about you and me. All that we do for the church, for our community and for God, is furthered when we know Jesus Christ more closely. And so the first element is to know Christ. As Christians, we believe our lives are aligned with God's purposes when we glorify Him. When our attention to the when our worship comes alive, we glorify God. When the word of Christ speaks deeply to us, we glorify Him. When we encounter Christ in the bread and wine of the Eucharist, we glorify Him. When we reach out to other people, we glorify Christ. When we accept forgiveness and offer it to other people, we glorify Christ. The second part of our vision summary is glorify Christ. And finally, Jesus sends all those who come to know Him out into the world to tell others about Jesus and His transforming way of life, living out our faith in our daily lives, and to bring God's love to others, asking nothing in return, just as God came to us in Jesus Christ and asks us nothing in return. So our final vision summary is make Christ known. St Andrew's Church, I believe, is an extraordinary community with a real sense of God's purpose. And I invite you to support our vision for the next 5 years to know, glorify, and make Christ known. Thank you.